Hilton once said, long is the way and hard, that out of hell leads up to the light. Robert Frost once said, 3 words that can sum up everything that I've learned about life. It goes on. Yours truly, Avi Klein, has this to say about the following guests here on Wrestling with Anything But. The simplicity that's lacking in our ambitions lead us to, as we navigate through life, often go by the wayside. Nevermore has it been more important to realize that humility and respect are the true guides that will help us reach balance and order in life. Our next guest exemplifies the latter. I'd like to welcome the former Duke that jumped to Josie, Mike Josie. How are you, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. A couple of things I want to start off with. On August 20th, 1968, the USSR performed a nuclear test. The Boston Celtics were still NBA champions of the world somehow, despite having a team older than Father Time. And it didn't appear clear whether or not Nixon wins the presidential election debate against Hubert Humphrey and George Wallace, which was a very interesting 3-man race. But one thing was certain. On August 20th, 1968, Mike Drosy came into this world. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Mike, but on average, any person born on this day has slept 6,157 days, the equivalent of 17 years.
Woo, it doesn't feel like it.
Now, considering you've been on the road, I'm sure there's like a lot less. There should be some leeway when we talk about that particular stat. But you were born on a Tuesday. Your birthday falls on a Tuesday this year as well. And you've been alive for 443,304 hours.
Hey.
Wow.
Let me hear that anywhere.
If I didn't feel old before, now I definitely feel old.
Oh, man. Jarrell, we've done it again.
Yeah, right?
It makes someone feel really shitty about living. Hey, listen, I've been there myself as far as age is concerned. But it's funny, you were born into a year that's infamous in the annals of U.S. history. It's one of the most tumultuous and devastating years in this country's history. Like 1968. That was literally, we were on the precipice of this destruction almost internally. Obviously you don't remember it because you were born into that year, but growing up, man, what were your main interests when you grew up?
Wow. What were my main interests growing up? Man, I don't know. I would have to say animals. I loved catching snakes and reptiles, and I loved music. Those are the 2 things I was really interested in.
About music, but regarding animals, so was it something you picked up on your own with friends, family, father, anyone, or did you just kind of like do it on your own?
It was just something I became interested in on my own, and it was interesting because up until the point where I became interested in reptiles, I couldn't read. I did not learn to read until a later age. It took me to like 4th grade just to learn basic reading skills, and I just remember one day I was asking my mom about information about snakes, and she said, if you want to know about snakes, you're going to have to read about it. And that was the turning point in my reading. I had to learn how to read so I could learn everything there was to know about reptiles and snakes.
Well, most people that are listening, and especially today, even though it's my own opinion, don't know how to parent. So maybe you should take that piece of advice. That's interesting. In a way, she motivated you to read because she realized you had an interest in something in particular and said, if you want to learn more about it, read it.
That is exactly what she did.
That's so interesting. So I have to ask you this. You brought up the snake thing. Any snake bites? Did that kind of ambition of catching snakes end quickly after maybe the first snake bite or so?
No, it did not. I was bitten by many snakes. No venomous snake bites, but man, over the years, I have been bitten by so many different snakes, some very large snakes. I used to breed Burmese pythons, and I told this, relatively infamous story on Facebook about a Burmese python that I had kept for a friend that I didn't have a cage for, so I let it live in my closet. And one day I went to look in on it and realized it wasn't there on the ground. And as I looked up, it was coming at my head. It was on the shelf, and it bit me on the ear and held on and tried to wrap around my head. And I ran around the house with this snake, holding it, trying to keep it away from my head, looking for a knife. I was going to cut its head off, and then it finally let go. And there was a lot of blood, but I still love snakes even after that. So
I picture a cartoon where, like, you just see the image of a guy having a snake on his head. He runs from one side of the screen to the next and back and forth.
That's basically what I was doing. That is what I was doing.
Oh wow! And let me ask you this. This is interesting. This is why we love. And by the way, we have to bring something up really quickly, as we did on our last podcast with Stevie Ray. Right Guard. There is going to be an announcement regarding Right Guard. They have something to mention not in our next podcast, but probably the one following that. So thanks, Right Guard. We'll talk more in detail later on this week. But I didn't know you were going to bring this up, so I just have to follow through. Did your parents try to get you away from this whole snake thing? Was this a fascination that led into adult life? I'm curious to know.
No, they actually encouraged it because they realized that the things that I was truly into. See, I grew up with what they now call ADHD. They just called it hyperactive back in the 70s. But they realized when I really was interested in something, like anybody with ADHD, I hyper-focused, and that motivated me again to learn more and read more. And so they encourage things like that. They encourage me.
Because in a way, it means like you put more emphasis than maybe someone else would, and in essence, probably makes you a better listener or a better reader because you actually put that emphasis on the task at hand, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and shortly after that phase, I had gotten to the point in my reading where in school I was actually put ahead 2 grades in terms of reading because I had put so much effort into learning how to read. So, yeah, they took they took that in the right direction. That's for sure.
Well, you mentioned some big, really venomous snakes. Any Vince McMahon stories? No, I won't get into that. We'll talk about that. But Jarrell, what do you think of that fascination? Would you ever find yourself crawling through Far Rockaway over there into the beach looking for snakes?
Of course not. I get a little weirded out when I see rabbits running by on the boardwalk by me. But
see rabbits walking by the boardwalk?
Yeah. And if you've never seen like an actual like rabbit hop in real life, it's kind of weird. But no, it's very
northeast, guys.
Yeah, like it's very strange. But no, but it was funny because like hearing about the whole thing with the snakes. It's making me, like, I want to ask the question, as a kid, like, growing up, were you a fan of Jake Roberts, or how was it when you met Jake Roberts for the first time? Or did you kind of feel like, wow, I wish that was my gimmick?
Well, he wasn't, Jake wasn't doing the snake gimmick at that time. Jake evolved into the snake in Mid-South, and he didn't even have the snake. He didn't have the snake itself, like Damien didn't come in till about 86 when he joined the WWF. But,
that is true, and as a kid, obviously I didn't know who Jake the Snake Roberts was, but as I got older and I was a teenager and into the high school years when Jake the Snake took off in popularity, I actually had so much knowledge of snakes that I did not like Jake the Snake Roberts gimmick because what he was doing was putting the snakes under stress when he carried them out to the ring and slung them around like that. Anybody that knows anything about reptiles will tell you that. So, yeah, he had heat with me over the snake gimmick.
Wow. Jarrell, that was a great question because, I was going to say, so, Duke, you were probably about 18 years old or so when Jake came in. So, in essence, did you find yourself when you were in the locker room with him, he had made that comeback, I remember at the 96 Rumble, and you were there as well. Going on the road, or, I'm not saying that you traveled with the guy or knew him really well or extensively, but did you kind of bring that up in jest? Like, hey, when I grew up, you kind of were mishandling snakes. Or did you keep it to yourself?
I think I kept it to myself for the most part, but there was one incident in Germany. We were doing a tour of Germany. It was house shows, and they did this angle between Jake the Snake and the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, and they taped it to put on TV from a house show. Anyway, in the end of it, of course, and Davey was the heel at this time, Jake wrapped the snake around Davey Boy. And in the process of selling it, Davey Boy rolled him around in the ring and rolled over and over on top of the snake and basically killed it. And I was furious. I didn't really say that much. I just walked up to Davey. I said, dude, you killed that snake, man. Yeah. And, he didn't really listen to what I was saying. But to that extent, I was like, man, that's what happens when you carry snakes to the ring. And and the poor guy that brought it, they would have some local guy always bring these snakes. So
right.
But that was one less than favorable story I remember about the snakes. No, I never really talked to Jake that much about anything like that.
No, but it's really neat to know that just growing up, you were part of, I guess, in terms of the wrestling boom. I mean, you saw it all. And again, let the listeners know, where did you grow up exactly, Mike?
I grew up in Miami, Florida.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
You were exposed, I'm assuming, to a bunch of different territories. It wasn't just the WWF.
Actually, the main territory I was exposed to growing up was Championship Wrestling from Florida and NWA territory. They had all the guys like Dusty Rhodes and Barry Windham and Steve Kern and those guys, Mike Graham. And I used to watch that every week.
I think it was probably after he passed, right?
I don't remember what year that was.
Yeah, probably not. Actually, wait a minute, 84. Yeah, you were probably still watching around that time. But what a hotbed! Were you actually like a fan of the Kevin Sullivan devil worshipping gimmick that happened? I mean, that was really cutting edge at the time. Really cutting edge.
I didn't think of it in terms of, I guess, religious effect. I just thought it was a really good, evil gimmick, basically.
Snakes are involved in that gimmick as well.
Yeah, I'm real good friends actually with Buddha Dean, the guy the Snake Master that came out with him. So
cool. Growing up, were you?
Florida is one of the most underrated hotbeds in terms of professional wrestling, not just in the '80s, but I mean historically. Would you say that at that particular time, and Jarrell, I want you to ask your follow-up question in a second, but would you say that at the time when the WWF was heading into territories and kind of going on their national and soon-to-be global domination, did you get reeled in, or were you always kind of like checking out the WWF product as well?
When they started really kind of taking over the airwaves, I was watching the WWF back then, the WWE product. It was just a different show. It was basically WrestleMania 1 and all the hype behind Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. That's what definitively made me say that I wanted to become a professional wrestler. Now, Championship Wrestling from Florida, I used to follow, like I said, I watched it every week, and they came to the Miami Beach Convention Center every Wednesday night. So it was a live show I could see every week, and I would go religiously every week and watch them.
Did you have, like, as far as your friends growing up, or maybe your dad, was anybody else as interested or would accompany you? Was it one of those solo things that you did?
Again, my dad realized quickly that I fell in love with it, and he encouraged it. My dad, in a lot of ways, was responsible for getting me in the business because there were times where I was maybe too scared or nervous to ask.
Right.
And I've told this story before, but the way I found a wrestling school down in South Florida was I was on the high school wrestling team, and we, as a fundraiser at the end of our season, they used the people from Championship Wrestling from Florida to do a show in our school gym. So like Dusty Rhodes and Lex Luger and Barry Windham, they all came into the show, and I knew at the time already I wanted to be a wrestler. But I didn't know where there was a school or how you learned, and we were working security for this show. We walked them to the ring, and I still was too scared to ask anybody. So my dad walked in the locker room and started asking him where I could learn how to become, and he got all the information, and he got me hooked up and signed up.
Wow.
He just walked in.
That's kind of how it started.
Now, your reaction would have been like, oh, thanks, Dad, or oh, thanks, Dad. In terms of tone, they're very different.
I was very thankful. I was just scared to death. That's why I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I got to reiterate, what a locker. You got Ron Bass, you got Blackjack Mulligan, Hector Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Mike Rotundo, One Man Gang, I think, was there at the time, Barry Windham. Wow, just a who's who, really, just a real who's who. Jarrell, you had a question you wanted to ask, and I'm cutting you off.
No, I just wanted to know, like, now that you've told the story about how you got the information for wrestling, how big were you back then, like, as far as, like, size and, like, height? Like, when your dad got the information, were you, like, a small, like, real skinny kid? Were the other guys receptive to you wanting to be a wrestler, or or was it more like, hey, this guy looks like he has a good size for it and could do it?
Well, I was wrestling heavyweight on the wrestling team, so I was about 6'5", 250 pounds, and that was only because I had to make weight. Otherwise, I would have been heavier. Because they had a super heavyweight past 250. But so I wasn't a small guy. I was an offensive lineman on the football team, but I mean, the wrestlers kind of talked to us, and they seemed like they were a little impressed with, we were talking about our records and stuff like that on the year, and they were impressed with that. But other than that, they didn't really talk to us that much.
Okay.
And again, I'm a good judge of character. It seems like you probably, one of the things that appealed to them most likely was probably that you came across as a humble guy that just didn't, even though deep down you watch these guys, you seem like the kind of guy that just treats people like people. I'm the same way myself. I know Jarrell is. Is that kind of the approach you had when you just met people? People are people.
I think that's the approach I've always had when I meet people. I think I learned, again, from my mom at an early age, trying to try to treat people the way you want to be treated.
Sure.
That's a very basic rule, but I've always, I guess, tried to be humble and tried to look for the good in people, and again, tried to treat people with the respect that I wanted to be treated with. And that carried over, and I've tried to be that way throughout my wrestling career. Sometimes to my detriment, I became almost a pushover at times, but yeah, I think I've always tried to be that way.
And did you find that after the transition of, I guess you were in high school, you were wrestling, what weight class? You were in the heavyweight weight class, you had said, right?
250.
Yep. This was freestyle wrestling?
Well, they call it folk style. It's high school style wrestling, so it's kind of a combination. But yeah, there's a lot of freestyle in it and some Greco-Roman, but it's all kind of put together.
Was being the fan of the product, I guess, did that sort of be the motivating underlying factor as to why you decided to join the high school wrestling team, or did that have nothing to do with it?
It's actually a funny story. That's part of it. I won't lie. I wanted to be a wrestler, but again, I was pretty timid, man, and I was kind of too timid to go out for the wrestling team because I didn't know if I could do it. And my 11th grade year, I was taking geometry, and man, I was horrible in math. And the geometry teacher happened to also be the head wrestling coach, a man by the name of John Davis, an amazing coach. Right. And he encouraged me to come out for the wrestling team. And the fact that I was failing geometry, I decided to go ahead and go out for the wrestling team. Now, I can't say that made me pass math, but I think it made me pass math.
Okay.
I mean, could you believe, Jarrell, check this out. So he has his high school wrestling coach is his geometry teacher. I mean, a two-way combination of just completely annihilating your brains in math class and then wrestling as well from the same man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's torture. That's the definition of torture.
Yeah.
A great wrestling coach and a genius of a man too. I will say that. He was very intelligent.
And I think, and I have to say that, I mean, I think the ability to be able to connect with a coach, teaching 8th grade history, God knows I don't think a lot of my students connected with me, but I mean, or they'd like to connect with me, but in a different way, maybe hand-to-hand combination or uppercut. But do you think that one of the things that actually helped you move, I guess, go forward was the fact that you had a coach or someone that you looked up to that made it a bit easier for you? Or was it one of those Bobby Knight situations where it was just hard drills, no making excuses, or could you actually talk to your coach on a human level?
My coach was not a hard ass like Bobby Knight. My coach, I'll never forget, like I said, I went out for wrestling in 11th grade. I had never wrestled before that.
Right.
And my first 12 matches I lost. I got pinned because I just didn't know how to do it. And I would get so frustrated, and my coach, he pulled me aside and he goes, listen, you're not supposed to win yet. You're going to learn. And when you learn, you're going to beat all these people. And literally, at the end of the year when we went through the district tournaments and stuff like that, I beat all those, I pinned back all those same guys.
All right.
That sounds like what Jarrell told me after I divorced my first 3 wives. He said, you're not supposed to be happy yet. They put you through the motions first. You got to pay your dues. Eventually you find the right one.
And then 5th time's the charm.
Yeah. Thanks for that advice, Drew. I'm still.
You're welcome. No, but
good luck with that.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I need all the luck I can get. Thanks, Mike. So music-wise, you definitely said music was a big part of your life as well. Growing up, or even now, do you have an eclectic taste, or is there a certain style or groups or bands that you were into?
Well, growing up, it was what they now call classic rock, Led Zeppelin and all those things, AC/DC. See, I came from a very musical family. Everybody in my family could play musical instruments.
Okay.
And I could never really read music, and I used to frustrate my sisters because they would sit at the piano and just practice for hours and hours on these things. But I could play by ear. I would walk up behind them, I'd watch them play it and listen,
right.
And then I would just sit down and immediately play it. What they were playing, and it drove them crazy.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But
here they are putting all the probably piano lessons and all the classes they're taking and all that. And then Mike just listens to it for 2 minutes and decides to play it perfectly.
Yeah.
Because in that way, my brain kind of worked differently. But ultimately, my favorite instrument was percussion. I played the drums, and me and my brother had a little band going through junior high and into high school.
That's neat. I mean, is it true for what they say about the piano playing where you can pick up a lot of instruments if you really excel at the piano? I heard about that. Like, if you could play piano, you can almost play, like, almost every instrument. But, okay, so you had a band and stuff. Would you say that your music, I guess your taste in music has changed over the years, or it's still pretty much stayed the same?
Man, as far as musical interest, I'm all over the place. I remember when me and Steve Austin, just to drop a name, used to ride up and down the roads. We used to listen to, who's that guy? We used to listen to Rage Against the Machine. So that kind of hard-nosed, hard-edged music. I used to love rap music when I was growing up. Down where I grew up in Miami, we went to a junior high school called Richmond Junior High School, man, and that's pretty much all you heard in that school was rap music.
Sure.
In the beginnings of rap music. I've always liked all different kinds of music, and nowadays I get in these phases, man, where something, like right now, I'm going to be honest with you, right now, and the guy that I do the podcast with, Sting Weber, was making fun of me on the podcast the other day. I'm on this kick right now, a TLC kick. I've gone back and started listening to the TLC albums because it was just an out.
Hey, nothing wrong with chasing waterfalls, man.
Exactly. That's music that I used to love, so I'm going back and I had a Linkin Park phase there for a little while. I went back and started listening to Linkin Park. Yeah, I just get on these little kicks, man, where I listen to something.
It's interesting because I can relate to Mike because I have an obsessive personality. And when I'm into something, I'll really go all the way, and then I'll get bored and I'll try something else. And just the pattern continues on and on and on. But I'll always go back. I'll find myself going back to that first or second obsession eventually. It just goes through cycles.
No, it's actually pretty cool because TLC, I heard the other day that they're going on tour. So it's funny that you just. No, it's weird that you just dropped that name because I just read that the other day. Is it weird for you now though? Because you said earlier. You said you used to listen to rock, but now they call it classic rock. And for me, like I was born in 1980, so if someone from nowadays, if I was to play like an old like LL Cool J, it's like this one kid. I was talking to this one kid one day about rap music, and they were talking about how there weren't a lot of female rappers nowadays. And then I said, yeah, because you guys didn't grow up on like Queen Latifah. And then he turns to me and goes, the cover girl. And
he identifies her as like an actress or a cover girl. He probably has no clue that she was. Yeah.
And I'm like, like Ice Cube, and they're like the guy who makes the children's movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's now it's considered. People are like, oh, you listen to that old school classic rap, but to me, it's just still rap. Like it's not.
Well, if you wake somebody up from a coma. And tell them talking about Donald Trump. We'll go, what, the business guy, the tycoon?
Yeah.
It's generational. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I have to ask you something, Mike, as far as, I guess, transitioning a little bit away from the music scene, sports-wise. Obviously, you were on the pro wrestling team. I'm not pro wrestling team, the amateur high school team. When it comes to wrestling, were there any other sports that you followed or played growing up that you were as interested in, maybe?
I played on the football team for a couple of years in high school, but I really just did not like it. I despised it. And when I found wrestling, I ended up leaving football, and I did not go out my senior year. Some of the coaches basically cried. They were so angry. And I was just like, listen, I found wrestling. I love wrestling. I'm going to focus on it because I knew, see, at that point I knew I didn't need a sport to go to college.
Yeah.
My mother worked for the University of Miami in their laboratories. So I had something called tuition remission as long as I could get good enough grades to get in. So then I decided, knowing that.
Also have something called a connection.
Yeah. And knowing that.
It doesn't hurt.
Exactly. And knowing that, I knew I was going to do something that I enjoyed, and wrestling on the wrestling team in high school and doing all the off-season AAU type tournaments is what I enjoyed. So
that was good.
That is what I did.
Yeah, you
had the
option.
I mean, it's not easy when you're obviously in a situation where, like you said, I mean, a lot of people, even, and we'll get to this a little bit later, and if we don't, we'll bring you back and talk about this, but maybe later we'll shine more light about just the story of how you even got to the WWF, which we'll talk about later, is amazing. It's really like one in a million. Because you were doing a similar gimmick, obviously, prior to joining the WWF. But we'll talk about that later. Basically just watching, I mean, if we're talking about the old boob tube TV, which, by the way, I think I should give myself some credit for actually mentioning the word boob in today's society without having any kind of, like, negative Me Too connotation to it. But,
you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, you got to watch out these days. Sorry, Rykard. But when you're watching the old boob tube and TV, just were there sports that you were into watching as far as football, baseball, basketball, or you weren't one of those pedestrian viewers, you just didn't care?
Honestly, I had difficulty focusing on television long enough to really be into anything except for two things: professional wrestling and cartoons. Those are the two things that basically could hold my interest longer than anything else.
And for all our viewers listening to Sunday morning, you just woke Jarrell up early. I mean, you woke him up. Jarrell and I have probably had a lot of in-depth conversations about things that mean nothing. But damn it, cartoons mean something.
Yeah.
You grew up, Mike, during an era where Saturday morning cartoons meant something, damn it.
The golden age.
Please, now you've definitely woken both of us up, actually. And I was already awake because there's a lot of things I generally like to talk to. I know Jarrell does too, but he has a real affinity to cartoons.
Yeah,
you grew up, what cartoons in particular were you a fan of growing up?
Without any doubt, I will say my favorite cartoons were the Looney Tunes. Bugs Bunny, all of those. Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, Yosemite Sam, Foghorn Leghorn.
Yeah.
It was that era of cartoons.
I think Yosemite Sam is a bit underrated, actually.
A bit underrated.
He's a little underrated. I mean, something you'll never hear about an animated object or obviously an image that doesn't exist. But I mean, I don't know. People don't talk about him much and give him a lot of his due. I think like Daffy Duck and like Bugs Bunny always get mentioned when you think of Looney Tunes. But there's a bunch of characters there that were just as iconic or funny, but they just don't get talked about. I don't know.
Well, nowadays some of them won't work nowadays.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, Yosemite Sam with the double barrels, who used to always jump and curse up. There's no way that character would work nowadays.
Oh, you mean as far as the connotations and all that?
Yeah.
It's a cartoon, man. The PC world sucks, in my opinion. I don't know. Mike, you agree with that? Does PC bother you? It's a general question. I mean, it's kind of broad.
Does
but,
PC bother me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would say it does. It's gotten to a point where it's ridiculous.
It is, right? It really is. You know what's funny? And I don't know, like it's wrestling with anything but. We talk about a lot of stuff. Even with stand-up comedy, which in my opinion is like the last vessel of complete, unadulterated, uncensored content. And even right now, comedians are being told to tone it down. Do you believe that?
I believe that's happening, yes, but it's ridiculous.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's one of those things where if you can't escape and find yourself in a position where you're being entertained and you're making someone's job harder when their job was to pick out things that normally people wouldn't talk about, then you know something's wrong with your society, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was a fan coming up of comedians like Eddie Murphy and Sam Kinison, without a shadow of a doubt. I still listen to Sam Kinison to this day.
He was a preacher. He started out as a preacher, I think. I read about that somewhere. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, Sam Kinison doesn't get nearly enough credit. I mean, people know him from the Back to School movie. Don't get me wrong, that character was iconic. He had like 2 scenes, but he stole the whole movie. Did you ever see Back to School?
Yes, and I remember that very well, where he screamed at Rodney Dangerfield.
I vicariously try to live through him because, I mean, teaching history, it wouldn't work, obviously, and my pupils were 8th graders, not college. But I loved the build-up. I love how when you first see Sam Kinison in that scene, and he starts, I'm laughing thinking about this, he asks one of his female students about Vietnam, and gradually you see him grinding his teeth because he gets pissed off at a very left-wing liberal answer, and it gets to the point where it evolves from him grinding his teeth to ripping off Rodney Dangerfield's desk.
Wow.
I mean, amazing. And when you watch that scene, you literally forget that it's Sam Kinison because he just plays that character so well. Yeah, Sam Kinison was amazing, but I mean, you were living again at the height of cartoons, at the height of comedy. Any comedians that you actually saw live that you like? I guess as a professional wrestler, did you ever like travel when you were traveling? Did you ever get a chance to kind of unwind and do things in certain cities that you wouldn't be able to do, or was it typically gym, dinner, show, plane, hotel, and you didn't get a chance to do much? Or
we did not get a chance to do much. That is typically the way it was. Like you said, gym, hotel, building, whatever. But there was a run there. There was a time early on, maybe it was, I want to say 94, 95 when I was there. And there was a time when I was riding with Adam Baum and Bob Holly.
Right.
Okay.
And every single town that we would go to, we made a point to find the local go-kart track and race each other. And we made a competition. Whoever won, or, the other two guys had to buy him dinner or something like that. But Bob Holly,
I have a feeling he was competitive.
So
right?
freaking pissed off if he would lose. Because I would purposely mirror drive these dudes. I would get in front of them, and I would drive slower, and I just wouldn't let him pass me. And Bob would get so freaking pissed off.
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of like someone like it's happening the other day, so I'm just trying to relate. Tell me if you think this is a good analogy or a comparison. I was actually in a supermarket, and there was somebody just really like I guess it was this person knew I was behind them. Like they knew I was trying to go through the aisles and put stuff in my cart, but through like the corner of their eye, they would move slower. Not because they wanted to get the item first, but they were just being dicks.
Oh my God, I had somebody do the same exact thing. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, is there a cutoff time where you just say, hey, dude, get the fuck out of the way? I mean, I don't know. I just,
I felt like
I bite my tongue a lot, but yeah, I mean, but I actually did end up telling the person, just get the hell out of my way. Yeah. And then I realized she was an 87-year-old lady.
You know, funny thing about that, and I will tell you exactly how I handled it. I have learned here, recently in my life, through my trials and tribulations, that I sometimes need to take a step back and not take things so seriously. I learned something actually, and I'm sure maybe we'll talk about this later on, but I had to go to drug rehab a couple times. And the last time, which I hope is the last time that I went to drug rehab, there was a situation where we were in the lunch line and they marched all the girls in ahead of us, and some of the guys got pissed. Well, anyway, the counselor standing with us said, this is an opportunity for an exercise in practicing patience. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, that has stuck with me to this day. And standing behind that little asshole with the cart in Walmart, as I'm gritting my teeth like Bob Holly getting mirror drived, I stopped. I took a deep breath, and I thought to myself, this is an opportunity to practice some patience. I need to chill out.
4 years ago, if that had happened, what would have been the case, you think?
Oh, my God. I would have blown up and screamed at somebody.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But it's interesting that a lot of times, at the moment when you heard that saying, I'm not saying it didn't resonate, but it's kind of neat to know that maybe years later, it pops up out of nowhere, and it applies to the situation. You can actually use that.
And because the reality of life in general is there's so many day-to-day situations that we get wrapped up in mentally. We get so pissed off and wrapped up in and create more out of it than it actually is. If we just stop and have a little patience, we will realize that there's not so much that's so serious in this life for us to get our blood pressure raised and get all pissed off.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Is there a chance, Mike, you could talk to my current girlfriend and give her some of the same spiel? Might help out a little bit. I mean,
I might charge you a counseling fee, but yeah, I could do that.
Oh, we tried. It doesn't work with me. Jarrell tried. Maybe you're more convincing. But so in terms of just again growing up, just hit a couple of other topics. We talked sports. We talked a bit of music. We talked about the giant 20-foot snake that almost ripped your head off. Politics. Were politics discussed around the dinner table, or was it not really that was brought up?
My parents always said they were Republicans, but they never talked that much about politics. And more importantly, with us, there was 4 of us children, and they let us know early on that we were going to go out in the world and find our way and make our own choices and decisions.
Right.
They were not going to mold those decisions or choices for us. And, the other 3 siblings made a lot of good choices. I made some bad ones, but they allowed us to learn about life, in a lot of ways on our own. And I really have to say I respect the fact that they did that. They did not, because I see people to this day on both sides of the political spectrum that have been raised and brainwashed to believe what they believe, whether it's Republican or Democrat or whatever. And sometimes I look at folks and I just think to myself, they're mindless sheep following something. They don't even understand what they're following. And that's on both sides again. So, but, I've never got into all that.
I agree with you 100%. I respect you for bringing something like that up because I'm never a fan of one of the problems I've told Jarrell this all numerous times already that I had with administration was teaching 8th grade history. A lot of times you're not allowed to deviate away from the syllabus. You're not. Stick to the lesson plan, and God forbid if you mention something as controversial as why there shouldn't be anything tagged. When I say tagged, I mean a label. A political party that is either goes one way or another. Even the Green Party, the Reform Party, obviously the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. When you have a tag, automatically someone's going to have a mental vision of what that tag represents. And I think that limits thinking. When you have a label placed on something, that limits the way a person thinks. They automatically assume that if someone's a conservative or a right-wing Republican, that he must be racist or scandalous or just trying to, help the 1%ers out there. Someone's a liberal or a Democrat, they probably assume he was this tree-hugging, pot-smoking hippie. I mean,
exactly. And it's ridiculous.
One way or the other. It really is. It really, really is. But God forbid you try to get people away from that because, you'll be ruffling a lot of feathers. I mean, I learned that myself too. But and by the way, dude, I got to tell you, Mike, I did some indie wrestling when I was younger, and I was absolutely awful. That's not to start a discussion. I just have to throw that out there.
Did you say awful or awesome?
Awful. Let me reiterate that again. Awful.
Gotcha.
If I say awesome, I'm sure that today in the internet world, people will remind me visually about how awful I was.
If anybody saw it.
I wanted to ask you about some favorite shows growing up, but you told me that with the exception of, I guess, of cartoons and a couple of things, like you weren't really interested in, but I mean, you did grow up in a really cool era of, not just TV shows, but movies themselves, late 70s.
I remember as far as TV, Happy Days and Three's Company, those types of shows,
Yeah, neat.
And that was down during the start of the Star Wars movies way back in those days. So, there was a lot of good movies.
How crazy was, the Star Wars era? You were there when it just came up. Was it nuts even back then? Yeah, right?
It was crazy for that time, but, man, it was nothing compared to some of the things we would see in later years as far as the marketing and the insanity of people. But I just remember they came out with a few action figures for Star Wars back in the beginning, and it was a huge deal. It was holy man!
So you got to mortgage a house to get one of those from one year.
Nowadays.
Have you ever been? Have you ever been to a Comic-Con, like a San Diego Comic-Con or a New York Comic-Con?
I have not. I have not yet, but I probably will though. Go check something like that out.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to a Comic-Con, they actually now have an entire hall dedicated to Star Wars merchandise and memorabilia.
Yeah, I bet.
It's not even, because, I mean, back in the days, like you said, when the Star Wars movies first came out, because these Comic-Cons are pretty old, they used to just have a table or a small...
How long have they been around, Jerome? How long have the Comic-Cons been around?
The Comic Cons, I believe they started in like the early 80s, and when they first started, it was basically just a bunch of people who came together
Comics,
to just
right?
the purpose was to share and trade comic books.
I remember I'm a huge comic book guy. Like when I was a kid growing up, the first time I ever actually noticed in Manhattan there was a place called 110 Plaza. It was a hotel, and when I went to one of those conventions, I thought I'd be running into peers, like kids my age who just want to trade Spider-Man comics or like Iron Man or whatever. And then I go to this like different floor, and for the most part it was my peers. But when I went up to this different floor, it was like, I think there might have been like 3 armored guards. And it was like it was like this like bulletproof like plate. And when I peeked inside because I couldn't go in the room, I was shocked to see like these tycoon guys with like suits and like Armani suits and shoes and like briefcases, like they were. So I guess there was always a market for it. There was always a market.
Yeah. No one just ever paid attention. No, but you would
take
definitely
that stuff seriously.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I did when I was younger, and I was just thinking as you guys were talking. Man, I remember walking into the 7-Eleven and they sold all these comic books. Nowadays, you got to go to, I guess, specific type a comic book store.
Now it's all digital where people like, and you know what it is with me, Mike, and I told Jarrell this, and I know I want to hear your take on it too, but I'm more hands-on. Like I want to hold the comic book. Call me old-fashioned, call me stubborn. I don't want to have like a Kindle where I read something electronically. I want to be able to hold something that I'm reading. But today, like, the comic book aficionados, what they do is not saying that it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I think they lose the magic of, like you said, going to a 7-Eleven, going to a mom and pop's comic book store, picking up a comic book, leafing through it, bagging it up, and going through the next. Like there's something almost really routine about it that speaks to being a kid, and like I think those innocent pleasures are kind of lost. I don't know. Sorry for ranting. I just feel like kids don't get in touch with some of the stuff that we did.
And that's another thing, like, back in those days, you could leaf through a magazine or a comic book, and the store owner wouldn't jump all over you. Now everything's wrapped in plastic. You got to buy it before you can look at it.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, these things are worth something nowadays. Yeah.
To talk about something else, even, because there's a bunch of things. I like to just definitely dig into a lot of, different topics that maybe you won't get asked. Growing up, was there a particular clique that you were, and we'll not talk about that clique, was there a particular clique of, friends that you were around as far as were they athletes, jocks, a mixed bag? You seem like the kind of guy that would, like, rotate through lunch tables because you just were cool with everybody. That's what it seems like.
For a lot of years, I sat by myself, or, I don't know, I had a few friends, but I remember one day in high school, I was sitting at the lunch table. It was probably 11th grade, and I was sitting by myself, and there was a table right across from me. And like some of the main jocks, some of the main sports players in different sports were all sitting together. They were like a lot of the popular dudes, and they called me by name. They said, "Hey, Drosy," and I just kind of looked over, surprised they even knew my name, and they waved me over and they said, "Come on over here, man, sit with us." And I was like shocked. And from that point on, those guys became like really good friends. But I didn't hang out with a lot of people up until that point. I was athletic. I always played some kind of sports and stuff like that, but I guess I didn't kind of hang with any particular cliques or anything like that. But then, I guess I was part of the jock crew because I was the heavyweight wrestler. I was for a time I was offensive lineman, and when I got good at wrestling, especially, that's when my popularity gained a bit, I would say.
I was going to ask you in your school, was sports like, not to be honest, in the Northeast over here, Gerald, I know you could attest to this too. Yeah, sports are a big deal, but they're not such a big deal where they are in certain hotbeds of the country. In your particular high school, is it like one of those things where if you were an athlete or like a jock, did it mean a lot in terms of popularity?
Yeah, especially if you were good, because we're talking about South Florida, or Florida in general, but you got the University of Miami, you got Florida State University, you got Florida up in Gainesville, the University of Florida.
Up to you also, so I just realized you grew up you said you grew up in Miami. I guess from a young age, relatively until what? I guess your college years, or
all the way until I think it was the end of 2002 was when I finally left.
there was a lot I guess growing up, you must have been 14, 15. There was a lot of hysteria going around in terms of the cartel, the Colombian cocaine wars, right down there in Miami. Did that ever touch home? Did it ever come home? When I say that, I don't mean literally, obviously, at your doorstep, but were you aware of that? I mean, was everybody's finger on the pulse of how dangerous that particular time was growing up, or was that not near your area from where you were, I guess, from?
When I was little, not so much, but getting up into in high school, I didn't get into all that stuff. Because again, I was playing sports, but when I got into college, yeah, the whole drug trade and cocaine especially was really taking off and crazy.
From 84 to 86 in Miami, it was almost like you were walking at your own peril. It seemed like, from what I understand, I don't know if that's media propaganda. They made it seem like it could be just, when I say propaganda, I mean, I have relatives who told me, I grew up in Queens, New York, and they would always tell me, yeah, we're not coming to New York because we'll get killed on the subway. I mean, that's propaganda. Was it one of those things where it was a little bit exaggerated, or was it really that dangerous in Miami at that particular time in the mid-'80s?
I think one of the big things that got people's attention, and I can't remember exactly what it was called, but there was a group of corrupt police officers that killed a bunch of drug dealers or witnesses or something, and threw them into the Miami River. And I don't remember what it was, the Miami River police scandal or some weird thing like that. But the picture was them pulling bodies out of the river, and it was all drug related. And that, I think, was one of the main catalysts that really made people realize just how dangerous and violent the drug trade was. And it just, I kind of grew from there. But yeah, it was all over the place down there, so.
And did it ever, I guess, find itself or fester itself into the high school as well, or that particular culture or scene?
Man, back in those days, high school kids, maybe smoke a little weed and drink alcohol, and that was it. I mean, and I say that the way I say that because I also was a school teacher here in Tennessee for a while, and I'll never forget one day watching a videotape on the school bus of a fifth grader snorting pills.
Oh wow!
So times have changed. Yeah, when I was in high school, it was maybe some weed and some drinking some alcohol, but times have changed. Kids are doing methamphetamine and things like that at such early ages now that it's just scary to think about. But
were you around growing up near that area of Sweetwater, the suburb over there, or no?
Quite a bit further south.
Okay.
Yeah.
Close to Himalaya or?
Himalaya.
Yeah. Near, I guess, Broward County.
Yeah, even south of that, but pretty close to Broward. Yeah, Dave's right below Broward, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I remember a lot in terms of just growing up. We actually even covered this as part of a lesson for my students years ago about just the drug culture, and a lot of it obviously you talk about the Cuban refugees that came in masses in the late 70s, early 80s, and there was a trickle down effect. But it's good that you weren't actually that didn't actually touch you, especially at the time in high school, because the demographic of people they were reaching were high school students. But I'm glad it didn't actually hit close to home in your case. I have to ask, that's why. Now, and again, this was during, the Reagan era, where drug trafficking probably was at an all-time high, internationally speaking anyway. So again, going to college itself, did the further interest in wrestling, was it an itch that didn't go away, or were you kind of looking to transition out of that at that point?
During the college years?
Yeah.
I was wrestling independent shows on the side while I was going to the University of Miami. And it's funny because I was at the University of Miami during a lot of those championship football years, but I didn't play football. But I was this big old dude walking around campus, and a lot of people just took for granted that I played football. But within the first year or so, people realized, because word of mouth, that I was working to become a professional wrestler. But yeah, I worked the indie circuit, as much of an indie circuit as there was back then, part-time while I was still going to college.
I can't expect you to remember every little detail. Of course, this is years ago, and not to outdate yourself. We already did that in the intro. But no, would you say that going back did anyone smarten you up when you started doing the indies? And I'm sure, I'm not saying kayfabe was still prevalent, but maybe it was. I don't know. Did you find the transition again from learning? Did you have to sort of unlearn what you learned in high school doing like wrestling, or did you apply that to the art of pro wrestling and use that as part of your movesets, your arsenal?
The amateur wrestling.
Yeah.
My years in high school, the amateur wrestling made it really easy for me to learn how to work in the professional wrestling ring. I was in great shape.
Sure.
I didn't have to get in shape. I didn't get blown up because I was still in high school when I started professional wrestling, and I had just finished the amateur wrestling career. And I'll also say I think the amateur wrestling made it easier to learn a lot of the moves in the chain wrestling and the different things you do in the ring. All around, amateur wrestling made it easier for me to learn professional wrestling. I think to the point where it only took me about 6 months of training before I had my first match.
Oh, wow. 6 months and you were ready to go. And, it's funny because watching your stuff in the WWF, you were always an agile big man. I mean, you moved really well for a guy your size. I don't think that's ever in question. You never seemed to get blown up. It always seemed like you were able to pace yourself well. And a lot of the things that I saw in terms of your match, I even saw some stuff earlier regarding this interview. I wanted to see some of your old stuff. A lot of your just basic punches just looked real. Like they looked. It seemed like, and I think the art of pro wrestling is obviously to let people suspend their disbelief. Now it seems more of the promo work that has to sort of lure you in. But I mean, in terms of the movesets, your punches, some of the basic maneuvers, even they looked legitimate. Like you weren't insulting people's intelligence by not nailing somebody. It seemed like it was all, I won't say snug or you were throwing potatoes. They looked really good. You didn't get blown up in the ring, and you could work with different sizes. I think that's the thing too. You worked really good with guys who were smaller or guys your size as well.
Did the football training?
I noticed.
Yeah, did the football training help with that at all, or?
Just in terms of being in shape, I would say, coming out of football, going into amateur wrestling, and then coming out of amateur wrestling, I was just straight through. I was in good shape in terms of stamina. But the funny thing about that, my punches, no, my punches were never snug. I didn't hurt anybody or hit anybody. Right. But I learned how to punch from two people. One was the guy that trained me, Bobby Wales, the Jamaican Jammer, Bobby Wales.
Right. Okay.
Because if you ever get a chance to see anything he's done, that's the way he punches. But also, early on, we did a tour of the Bahamas, and kind of a part owner of the ring that I learned in was this guy named Tyree Pride, the Haitian sensation. And he ran a tour down in the Bahamas, and he brought guys like Ox Baker, Tiger Conway Jr., and even Bugsy McGraw. And Bugsy McGraw pulled me aside on that tour one day and showed me how to throw punches. And he said, basically, you want to come from up high to down low when you throw the punch, and you always want to animate it and make it so everybody in the arena could see it. That was like the big lesson I learned on punching from Bugsy McGraw himself.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was evident. I mean, obviously, when you threw a punch, it looked like it always connected. I think that's a lost art. I think a lot of people are just so concerned with high spots these days. Jarrell and I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I guess maybe it's not even their fault, you could say, because there's TV time that's allotted, and they have to. But their goal, I guess, right now is just to run through their spots. And we talked about this with Al Snow, actually, was 2 weeks ago. We spoke about it with him in depth on our podcast. And I mean, in my opinion, I told him I think one of the lost arts today is the fact that a lot of guys don't know how to sort of improv, think on their feet. If they miss a spot or botch a spot, they go back to it. You know what I equate it to? I know you said you don't really watch sports, but you've seen those slam dunk contests before, right? Here and there?
Yes.
Yeah. Today what they do, it's an interesting thing. Like if a guy misses a dunk, Jarrell and I are big basketball guys too. Like if a guy actually misses a slam dunk, the judges give him, I guess, 3 more times to either replicate the dunk or try something else. The guys never try something on their feet. They'll go back to that failed attempt over and over. And what it does is it takes the crowd out of it, because the crowd just saw the guy miss three attempts. And when he goes for his 4th attempt, even if he connects, we kind of saw it coming. And I think in pro wrestling, one of the great advantages psychologically is being able to surprise your fans, whether it's with a move they haven't seen or didn't see coming, or with a promo. Like when you're trying to do something and replicate it, and the audience that plays such a big part in pro wrestling sees it coming, kind of loses its magic, its feeling. I mean, do you agree with that, or?
I do agree with that. I remember a term I used to use. I would call them script workers back in the day, because guys that had to sit down and plan out every little single move and every nuance of the match.
Right.
I would call them script workers. It is definitely a lost art of being able to call a match in the ring. When I talk to young guys today, because I'm involved with shows now, and I'm actually wrestling a little bit on a limited basis, but
Right.
when I talk to young guys and they ask me questions to what are the important things to know and to learn, one of the first things I say is learn how to work a match on the fly, man. Learn how to call it in the ring, because nobody does that anymore, and it is a lost art. As far as redoing spots, it's funny. In terms, I remember my very first TV match. I wrestled Mike Bell on
Right.
Superstars, and he botched my finish, and
Wow.
I didn't have a great understanding of television editing, so it turned into basically a sidewalk slam, and I left it that way. And afterwards, all the camera guys were going, "Dude, we were yelling at you, do it again, do it again." And I got to the back, and Scott Hall was like, "Dude, you should have done it again." And I was like, "You could do it again?" They said, "Yeah, they could edit it, man. They'll edit out the botch and or the bad one, and they'll put in the good one." And from then on, I always
back to
did
the
it.
ring and try to convince them, "Hey, let me do it again."
No, let me do it again. No.
They were on to the next thing already, yeah.
Yeah, they were on to the next thing, that's for sure. Sometimes I did it like live to tape Superstars, but
it's funny. My next question to you was, did you find the atmosphere of like veterans there at that time when you broke in? And I guess we'll talk about it later, but in more depth. But one thing I have to ask was, were they helpful for the most part when you came in, a lot of the veterans, or did you find it already to be kind of like a sort of a negative, unhelpful atmosphere?
some were helpful, some were not. It was interesting. Some guys that have over the years had a bad rap for being selfish. Like Sean Waltman, he was the 1-2-3 Kid then.
Right.
Man,
Yeah.
he would always pull you aside and talk to you and as far as talking to you about things that looked good or things you should fix, or he was always, and it was not in a condescending way. Scott Hall was another guy like that. And
Yeah.
I think a big part of the reason for that is, I always call those guys Kurt Hennig guys. A lot of those, and even Shawn Michaels to a certain extent, those guys learned, and they'll tell you, they learned a lot from Kurt Hennig. And, that's the way Kurt Hennig was. And so, yeah, Scott Hall, 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman, man, they would pull me aside when I'd come back from the ring and I'd say, listen, you shouldn't do that, or you should do this, or whatever. And they were always real cool about that. And there were a lot of guys like that. But then, of course, there was the few that, were jerks or bitter people because their push wasn't going the way they wanted it, or they just in general didn't like giving out advice, or, they were paranoid about their spot, or whatever the case may be. So they weren't forthcoming with much advice. Yeah.
Jarrell's ears just morphed into Keith Jarrell's ears because he was a huge Kurt Hennig fan.
Yeah.
That's for a fact.
Well,
Hennig was a great dude.
Number one favorite wrestler.
And Hennig at that time, Hennig was, I guess, the Lloyd's of London, the insurance policy plan. He wasn't wrestling in a ring. He was commentating and things like that. He was great at it. He was actually great at it. So that's what I was going to follow up with. Was he still an integral part, I guess, of the locker room, even though he was just doing commentary?
Yes, he was. Whenever he would start talking about business, I remember what that old investment commercial was. When so-and-so talks, people listen. Man, it's like the whole locker room would get quiet and start listening to what Kurt Hennig had to say.
Right.
That's just the way it was. When I'd sit down near him or next to him or in a group and he'd be talking, I would just listen. I wouldn't say nothing.
Were you ever in a position where you received conflicting advice about the same topic? And were at a crossroads as to what to do?
Oh my God, yes. My career in general, there was, and I've talked about this and written stories about it on my Facebook page, but there were situations in my career where I had to make decisions, and I would go to two people that I respected.
That Bret Hart story, right? That you had mentioned.
Yeah,
before?
Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin both. And unfortunately, I always took Bret Hart's advice and never took Steve Austin's advice, just because of their positions at that time, basically. And Bret Hart's advice was not the good advice. Always turned back. Hindsight being 2020, Austin was giving me the good advice every time.
Sure. So what was bad about Bret's advice? It was just like his personal opinion versus what's actually happening, or?
Plus, I think he was giving me advice in terms of dealing with the office and specifically dealing with Vince McMahon that were things that worked for Bret Hart, the champion, that weren't going to work for Duke the Dumpster Droese opening the mid-card wrestler.
So it wasn't out of malice that he was giving you some of this bad advice?
Man, I don't know. I think he was winding me up part of the time too.
Right.
But I don't think he was trying to destroy a career.
Sort of get away from that. Do you think a lot of this, and this may sound mundane, but do you think a lot of this has to do with the fact that there might be some boredom due to the constant traveling and just being away from your family or your routine? I mean, I know the ribs and stuff, obviously. I've had a couple happen to me as well. You know, actually, I have to say this really quickly. He passed away, I think about 2 weeks ago also. But when I did indie wrestling, Chris Pally, the late Chris Pally's King Kong Bundy, was one of the nicest guys in the world. He pulled me aside one day and asked me if the promoter had paid me. And I said, yeah, sure. He paid me like $50, whatever. This was years ago. And I checked in my pocket, and instead of $50, there was $100 in there. There was actually $100 in there. And the guy winked at me like he was just, he was just, you don't come across stories like that. I know Bundy was around in his comeback when you were there as well. He had made his comeback. But the point I'm trying to get at is, he pulled me aside, and I remember there was like an entourage of people. We were all having dinner. I wasn't the only one eating with him. And he brought up some good advice. He had said to me that the road makes people do stupid things. I don't know if that's an excuse. Can we apply that to everybody, or is it a generalization? I don't know. But do you feel like it's possible that maybe like some of the advice you got was just, again, you said he was trying to wind you up. Does the road do that to people? You were on the road for many years, man. Like, does the road do that?
Well, for me in particular, the road can make people paranoid. The business can make people paranoid in a lot of ways. And, there was drug use and alcohol use going on in my case that made me irrational in terms of the way I was thinking a lot, too. But I also was privy to conversations between guys like Bret and Davey Boy Smith where they talked about winding other people up and getting them pissed off about the business. They'd say, I heard them talking about Lex Luger one time and how Davey Boy was just winding him up to the point where basically Lex left. Of course, he wasn't happy about his pay or any of those things as well, or the push after the Lex Express thing fell apart, but it didn't help that Davey was having a good time at his expense either. So yeah, I heard that they were doing that. I heard them talk about it specifically. So I'm sure there was some of that going on.
There were stories about the Calgary guys because of their insane road trips that they had to take before they made their way to the WWF at the time. And they were just the ribbing culture over there, from my understanding, Calgary was probably insane, and maybe they carried that with them, but. And that's the other thing too. So you were getting, from what you said, let's speak about something positive. You were getting good advice from the vets, but at some point, I'm sure, did you feel like that you were able to kind of give that back to some of the younger guys? You were young yourself, but it doesn't take a long time to be a veteran in terms of just understanding the psychology, the road schedule. After a while, that some of the younger guys who broke in, were you able to kind of like lend some advice to some people who just like had broke in at the time you were there?
I always tried to, especially about just kind of weathering the storm, as I like to call it, in the beginning, where, when you first come in, a lot of times guys aren't making a lot of money. We weren't making a lot of money back then in general because business was down, especially in the States. But, just trying to, tell guys to weather the storm and not get, too angry about the current situation early on and just kind of make it through because things would get better. Those kind of things, and little points here and there about work or TV stuff after I had learned it the hard way, I would try to kind of pass that advice along as well.
Were you one of those workers that preferred to lend advice as to the angle or storyline of your match, or did you say, hey, look, and there's a difference between a booker and a writer, obviously, and people don't talk about that enough, but if you were presented an idea for an angle, were you in an atmosphere where you could and also preferred to lend some advice as to maybe how this should go, or did you just kind of kick back and say, you know what, I'll just do what the office says?
I felt a lot of times that I had to do what the office said, but, there were times where I tried to float ideas across to Vince himself. Now kind of infamous story. Of course, Austin says he doesn't remember it, but one time me and Austin walked into the office together to talk to Vince. This is before Stone Cold took off, but we pitched an idea where we were going to be like a group of skinhead type people, and it wasn't going to be like overtly racist skinheads, but we were all going to have shaved heads, and he was going to be like the main guy, and I guess I'd be like his henchman, and then there would be other groups like, the African American group and a Hispanic group, and we would attack these guys and fight, and there would be, and Vince just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And, cause I was on my way out anyway. I was already kind of pissed off and had a bad attitude. And Steve was trying to help me by bringing me in there for that meeting. But, after that, I ended up going away. But funny thing, later on, they had all these factions.
Yeah.
The Nation of Domination, the Boricuas, the
DOA. You were actually ahead of your time because, you said not overtly racist. The DOA and their biker gimmick, and then, like you said, Los Boricuas, and then Nation. Yeah, I mean, so it's funny he gave you that look, but in essence, you might have kind of like sown the seeds to an idea that he used later on.
Well, yeah, and it was way before Vince took the gloves off, as he called it, going against WCW. This was still at the tail end of when it was trying to be considered family, kid-friendly entertainment. So that kind of idea was just way, way ahead of its time.
Right. So I guess, were you assigned, were there favorite road agents on the road that you preferred to, not saying that any of them were bad, but were there any road agents that you kind of clicked with more so than others?
Tony Gurria was probably the best road agent I have worked with, because he didn't have an axe to grind. He, certain agents had their favorites. They're like Jay Strongbow loved the Click guys. He loved Shawn Michaels. He loved Kevin Nash. And you could see it in the way he dealt with people. I mean, he kind of treated me like crap because his first impression of me was bad, and it stuck with him. So I was constantly trying to prove to him that I deserved to be there. But guys like Tony Gurria was awesome. Rene Goulet was actually awesome. He seemed like a hard ass, like he would scream at you if you did something wrong, but it was always in the interest of improving you and improving how you worked in the business. It wasn't malicious. Like Strongbow would just kind of jump all over me about something that was stupid and unimportant. And make me feel stupid. Tried to make me feel, like I was.
And that wasn't very conducive. That wasn't conducive to how you would actually follow through. You probably didn't, like you mentioned, because I bring it back, and I like to relate things. I bring it back to that high school coach that you had, who you said wasn't a Bobby Knight type, and it seems like you kind of took to that style of coaching more, right?
Yeah, and I'd say that's the way, like, again, Tony Gurria, he would just sit down and talk to me for lengths of time about ideas and things I should try, even to the point where there was times where I'd say, I don't think that'll work with me, and he would just be like, just go out there and try it, and I'd try it, and sure enough, man, it worked like $1 million.
Is it safe to say that the road is, especially during the house shows, now they call them the live events, but like during the house shows, is that where you could experiment with stuff more or less?
Absolutely. 100%, yeah.
International crowds, and by the way, speaking of road agents, was George Steele, the late George Steele, was he still a road agent when you were there?
Yes, he was. And it's another funny story because Jim Myers was a great guy. And in the end, when I was there, he was definitely helpful and tried to be helpful. But I've told the story about, we were talking about alluding to how I got my job there, and I had created these promo packs, and before I ultimately made the move I did with Vince, I had gone to a live show to talk to whoever, and in that case, the road agent was Jim Myers, George Animal Steel,
Right.
at the James L. Knight Center in Miami, Florida. And I walked up to him and talked to him and handed him my promo package, and he assured me it would get into the right hands, but he never took it anywhere. I always make the joke, I think it's still in that garbage can at the James L. Knight Center. But when I made the move after that and went to Vince, and then they brought me in.
Maybe you found that note in the garbage can, just decided to take the garbage can to the ring with you, and that's how the gimmick started.
Exactly. So, and then when I finally made the move and they called me up for the tryout and brought me in, George Animal Steel was one of the first guys that came walking up to me in the back, and he was trying to convince me that he told them about me and all this stuff. But the reality was I made the move on myself. I walked up to Vince and did it myself. So,
and yeah, if you want to know more in depth, and again, please feel free to interject at any time. But great story. I want to bring this up really quickly because I definitely want to have you back next time and talk about more stuff. But Mike Drosy, Duke the Dumpster, he did one of the most innovative things I've ever heard. I think they were doing, correct me if I'm wrong, if the details are sketchy, but I think Vince was, I know they had a lot of exhibitions where there'd be these table conferences where you try to kind of market your product. Didn't you walk up to Vince at one of those shows and just like, you were editing the old school, really difficult way when you were doing indie work? You edited, I think you mentioned with your brother, and you were putting together like a VHS tape and a package of some of your best stuff. And the music itself was kind of neat as well. So it kind of like flowed well and was in sync. It worked well with the flow of your matches. And you presented this to Vince, right? I mean.
Yeah, it's because it's funny. At that point in time, I was getting ready to get in my car and just drive around the country, and there were still a few territories left. I was going to drive to every wrestling company I could think of. And,
Smoky Mountain, probably, right?
Yeah, all of them. And USWA, and even go up to New York. Anyway, the first place I went was the James L. Knight Center, where George Animal Steel situation. And then about a week after that, I was at work reading the paper, and it was talking about the Hulk Hogan scandal and how Hogan jumped to WCW and the steroid scandal and all this and that, and Vince was on trial. And one of the last sentences in the thing said that Vince McMahon, who was also in attendance at the convention, had no comment. And I realized he was there in Miami. He was at the Miami Beach Convention Center at the NATP convention, which is a convention of TV executives for not just wrestling, but all kinds of shows were trying to sell themselves to TV executives. And I basically got the credentials of a local television executive and put on a suit. And I had made all these, I had like 30 of these promo packs. So I just took one in a little leather briefcase and walked in there like I was an executive. And I walked up to Vince while he was drinking coffee and pitched him real quick, told him who I was, had a little short conversation with him, and gave him the promo pack. And they called me about a week later.
This stuff they don't teach you in school. I got to tell you something. I literally haven't done this in a podcast before. Not that it means anything because we're all people, but I'm going to applaud you. That was ambitious stories like that. Not only are they not usually often told, but you broke away from the norm of just A through B through C through Z. You did something so ambitious. I applaud you for it. And, to be honest, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody says no. But at the same time, the fact that you actually took the time to not only just show up just as a regular indie guy or wrestler, you had your credentials, you showed up with your media credentials, you dressed up, you had your tape. Like, you realized that if you were going to kind of like, so to speak, blow your wad, you got to make sure that it's going to count. And it seemed like it counted.
It's kind of the opposite of your high school story where you said you were afraid to go into the locker room. This time you just walked right up to him.
I really applaud that. That's an amazing story. It's an amazing
story. I knew that I had to do something different because I didn't have a brother or an uncle in the business or anybody, any close friends even that were in the business. I had to do something different. And I remember talking to my mom about it beforehand, going, do you think I should do this? And my mom's advice to me at that point was, listen, you've already got no for an answer.
Yeah.
If you don't go, the answer's still going to be no. Now go in there and get a yes.
Yeah, get a yes.
I love that. So there was some trepidation but you actually followed through and did. I applaud you for that. That really says a lot. Not to say that today that something like that would work. Today I don't think that. I think there'd probably be about a crew of police officers around Vince.
Oh gosh, yeah. Since then, they don't allow that to happen anymore. I've only heard of two people, myself and Oscar from Men on a Mission, who walked up to him in an elevator and rapped to him. Those are the only two people that I think walked up to Vince.
I just would love just to imagine Vince kind of like trying to like, you know, dance.
Look at Oscar.
Stuff, like,
or looking at Oscar like, what are you doing?
Well, he saw the credentials and thought I was an executive first.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You know what's funny? Here's something that I want to get in depth to. I love to just pick little details up. Look, so when does he find out that you're not an executive?
About a half a sentence in, he realized. But then I think he looked at me like, wow, you've got some freaking balls.
Yeah.
I love that. I really, really do. I applaud that. Let's get into some levity right now. I like to play a game, and then afterwards, there's a lot of stuff I want you to plug and talk about, and there's some stuff later on once we wrap up that we got to bring up once this podcast comes to a conclusion regarding right guard, and we'll have you back. We'd love to have you back. But let's play a game of either or. If these either ors are outdated to our younger listeners, tough shit. Google them. The world didn't begin at the dawn of the 21st century. The world might end at the end of the 21st century. But hey, enough morbid talk. Either or. Jay Leno or Dave Letterman?
Dave Letterman.
Bugs Bunny or Roger Rabbit? I think I know the answer.
Bugs Bunny, 100%.
By the way, and I'll kind of interject, and Drell, feel free to do the same at some of these between a couple of questions. I want to ask you about the whole Roger Rabbit thing. Do you think that was sort of a stylized way of getting away with introducing the world into like the adult cartoon? It was one of the first adult cartoons.
I guess so, man. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of Roger Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got one for you. Thundercats or Transformers?
Transformers.
Yeah. Kojak or Columbo?
Kojak.
First one to actually no. I think actually no one's picked poor Columbo. I got to take him off this list. I don't think anybody's picked Columbo already. Nobody's picked. I guess Kojak was more cool. He had that kind of like cool swag to him.
Yeah, and the lollipop, trying to quit smoking or whatever it was. And
yeah. Who loves you, baby? That whole thing.
Who loves you, baby?
Gatorade or Powerade?
Oh. Man, I would say Gatorade because I drank it for years, and then getting more health conscious, I realized how much sugar was in it, and so the Powerade Zeros are where it's at now. So that's a convoluted answer. But yeah, I guess it's Powerade down without the sugar.
By default, right. Pizza or sushi?
Oh, Lord, brother. I'm a pizza addict.
Thank you. Good answer. Okay, you know what? Let's get more in depth. What's your favorite topping on a pizza?
What's my favorite what?
Topping on a pizza.
Man, I just go standard. Any of the meats, man. Pepperoni, ground beef, sausage, no ham.
I've never had a ground beef pizza in my life.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Oh, here's one for you. G.I. Joe or Voltron?
G.I. Joe. I grew up with the action figures, man.
G.I. Joe.
Nice.
And by the way, on the road, I have to ask this regarding travel. I know that you said that it was, in fact, a very, monotonous schedule of going to the hotel, going to the gym, eating, and then having the match. But, I mean, were there times that stick out right now when I ask you this question that you actually deviated away from the routine and maybe decided to kind of like, whether it's see the sights, or, just do something that you always felt like you could never possibly do again since you were in a certain place or location?
A lot of other guys did that. I never got in, aside from the go-kart thing, sometimes we would kind of veer if it was something really special, but I can't off the top of my head think of any. Like I remember when we went to Tel Aviv, Israel one time, a lot of the guys, I don't know, they went somewhere that was, a lot of the sites there. They went on a tour there, but I just stayed at the hotel. I was like, I'd rather get some sleep. Because usually I was up all night partying anyway, so I wanted to get as much sleep as I could before the show. So I didn't go on the tours.
If you looked me up back then, we could have done the podcast 25 years earlier. That's where I was living. Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Michael Jordan, 100%. I was a Bulls fan for a while when he was.
Let's talk about this. Go ahead, please. Expand.
I was a Michael Jordan fan. I was also a Bo Jackson fan, so call me a bandwagon.
No, I won't call you a bandwagon fan. But you know what? Okay, so Jarrell and I have this debate. He's a Bulls fan. I'm a Michael Jordan guy myself. I do applaud Scottie Pippen for being a very underrated player that played an integral part as to why the Bulls won the championships that they did. But do you agree that the great quality that Jordan had was that, let's simplify things, people wanted to play with him, whereas teammates of LeBron don't seem like they want to play with him. Does it come down to that to differentiate the greatness? I mean, there's a lot more things we could talk about, but isn't the most basic quality to be considered great or one of the greatest is to have your teammates want to play with you?
That's part of it, but I just think Michael Jordan could win a game by himself more so than LeBron James can win a game by himself.
Right.
Of course, the talent around him on his same team or on other teams and in the NBA in general nowadays is so much far beyond what the talent was back in Jordan's era.
Sure.
Jordan was just light years ahead of everybody, and he could single-handedly take over a game.
And look what he made. Like, he actually transformed a team that had an aging Bill Cartwright. Role players like John Paxson, Will Perdue, Stacey King, Scott Williams. The list goes on, where LeBron demands to have his, his three-headed monster of the big three always. Wherever he goes, he needs to have the superstars around him to compete.
Yeah.
Jordan transformed some of those players that weren't really
He made them superstars.
Yeah, he did. He did. Good, great, great answer. I think if you would have said LeBron James, then probably would have been an issue. I probably would have complained to Reichard and said, look, gotta stop the interview right now. We gotta. In the looks department back then, don't want to get you in trouble, but in the looks department back in the 90s, Carmen Electra or Jenny McCarthy?
Jenny McCarthy, man, she's just got that.
Wrong answer. The right answer is both. But go ahead.
Yeah, I guess so. Man, Jenny McCarthy. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, she was at one time. She was definitely a knockout.
Yeah, she was.
Godzilla or King Kong?
Oh wow, man, I gotta say Godzilla because the old dubbed over Japanese Godzilla movies were on TV all the time. It seemed like
they were, and you knew nothing. There might have been subtitles. I remember watching them not even needing or wanting subtitles. Like there was something cool about not understanding what the hell like the locals were saying. You just kind of.
Well, they just dubbed them over with really bad English.
Yeah.
But yeah, those were classic. And it's just so obviously somebody walking around in a big lizard costume, but man, it was awesome.
Godzilla became one of those guys. Like you ever meet guys who like they'll pick on you and stuff and just like joke around, or even sometimes maybe even like get at it with you, but they'll be really defensive if somebody else who's an outsider does, and then all of a sudden like protect you. Godzilla, like he transitioned from being a guy who like demoralized and terrorized his own country in Japan to a protector of it. Like once he started seeing outside invaders, he was like, you know what, guys, if anyone's going to destroy this country,
well, yeah, because every show or every movie, he had to make the big baby face turn. He'd come out as a heel, and then, it's like Stone Cold Steve Austin in WrestleMania 13. He had to make the big turn right there.
Yeah. Do you agree that one of the best heels in movie history was like the Cobra Kai teacher in Karate Kid? What a
yeah, he was a good heel. He was a good heel.
And Johnny, who was actually like the character name of Johnny, who like tortured Ralph Macchio's character, he made a good face turn at the end of the movie. Like he was a heel the whole movie. And then like
he gave him his props at the end. Yeah,
he gave him his props out of nowhere. Like he just out of nowhere. Like one minute he's trying to like rip the guy's head off, and then he's like, "I love you, man." Like. And
now they're trying to rehash that whole thing on YouTube. I'm like,
Did you catch that? I saw Karate.
No, I refuse. I refuse to watch it.
You know, we're gonna have a segment about like best heels and faces in like movie history. There's a bunch. So yeah, no one's picked.
How about the nurse from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
What a heel! Wow, what a heel! Nurse Ratched, right?
Nurse Ratched.
Wow, nobody liked Nurse Ratched. She was such a bitch. And you know what's funny? Like there was a character named Billy that was actually like he was a really good actor. He did his voice.
The kid that stuttered.
Yeah, he stuttered, and like he didn't do anything. Like I can understand why she would hate Jack Nicholson's character because he was kind of a douche. But like, and even then, he wasn't really so much a douche. He was trying to liberate everybody and like have them like, But like there was a point where like the stuttering guy had no qualms about like getting involved. He would always listen to Nurse Ratched. And then he gets laid because like Jack Nicholson, like I think he brings in a couple of prostitutes overnight. He pays off the guards. And then the guy gets laid, and for getting laid, like Nurse Ratched tells him like, you know what, I'm going to tell your folks like what happened.
Yeah.
And then
he
later he
split his wrist with glass. He
lost it.
Oh my God. I think she won an Oscar for that.
This may actually end our sponsorship with Right Guard. I don't care. I'm more than off the cuff.
Let's not do that.
Well, I just have to say this. I actually remember watching it for the first time, wanting to see Nicholson choke the life out of her because he was strangling her.
I believe she won.
She was just a bad person. She was like.
I believe she won an Oscar for that, and in her speech she goes, "I've never loved being hated so much."
Yeah, that's
something
right.
to that effect.
I read some stuff. I actually worked with William Friedkin. I don't know if you know that. William Friedkin did The Exorcist. I shouldn't even say worked with him. It was more or less I was pitching a script to him years ago for Dimension Film Studios, and the guy had a story about the actress who played Nurse Ratched. I forget her name. She said, and you can research this online, she actually said that she showed up like naked on set a few times because she was such a method actor that the rest of the cast hated her, so we're loosening things up. She would actually show up naked on set a couple. The thing is, like, I would actually think that, and again, not to say anything negative about anybody, but like, I would probably hate her more for doing that. I don't think I would want to see Nurse Ratched naked. Like, I would make him detest her even more. You know? But,
I don't know, man. Nurse Ratched's kind of hot. Come on now.
Oh, really? Oh. Well,
He's hot, like in a third world kind of way. Yeah.
Speaking of third world kind of way, for a while, transitioning to my next either or, these two sports weren't considered Olympic sports. They now have, like, I think they're officially in the Olympics next year. Bowling or darts, Mike? Bowling or darts?
Darts, I guess.
Darts, okay. Not too enthusiastic either.
Olympic. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, they're in the Olympics. I think they're running out of stuff to put in there, but they're in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses or Metallica?
Guns N' Roses.
By a landslide, or is it kind of like...
By a landslide. I was in college when Appetite for Destruction came out, man. I was like, wow.
Yeah, great.
That album it stands the test of time as one of the most amazing albums I've ever heard.
My brother saw their comeback a couple of years ago. He went to one of their shows in Colorado. He said they're actually really still good. Like, they're actually, if you get a chance. But listening to 8.5 hours of Ivanka Trump doing stand-up comedy or giving Donald Trump a 2-minute back rub?
Oh, wow. I would have to listen to who, Ivana or Ivanka?
Either one. Take your pick.
I'd listen to both of them for 8 hours each.
Yeah, I take the stand-up comedy.
Golly. You gotta figure Trump's got a hairy back, but no, he's so rich, he probably gets the hair lasered off. Ooh.
He probably does, yeah.
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Oh, God, yeah. Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock?
Ooh. Chris Rock.
Like his stand-up material?
Yeah.
Yeah. His sketch comedy stuff was good.
Yeah.
I don't think in SNL, like, he got too many opportunities to do his, like, sketch stuff, but his stand-up is amazing.
Yeah.
Here's why I would pick Seinfeld. I'll tell you why. Seinfeld, I love how comics are able to still make you really laugh and make you think without, like, using, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind, I throw out F-bombs all the time, but, like, there's an art to, like, being able to make you laugh without cursing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I dare you, again, if we're not, like, like, lose sponsorship already, but, like, Bill Cosby, he was amazing at that. I'm not talking about what he did. Let's not.
And he could do an hour and a half and not say a cuss word.
Right? And he just made observational humor would just make you laugh. You go like, wow, I never thought about that. He was amazing at that. But no, Chris Rock, when he gets wind up, like, forget it. When he's hot, you can't. Yeah, he's great. McDonald's.
He's just really funny, just like Dave Chappelle, man. It's just hilarious.
Yeah.
These guys can stand up there and just tear a house down.
Apart. Yeah, I think Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle could talk about, like, a pen or a pencil and make you laugh. Like, yeah, Richard Pryor had that ability too. He was amazing. Great storyteller. McDonald's or Burger King?
Wow. That's a tough one. I grew up on both. Man, I would have to say Burger King on that one. Wow.
Yeah, I would agree because nothing's beating that Whopper.
The McDonald's fries, I think they're better than, like, the Burger King fries. But the burgers that Burger King has.
See, but I went with Big Mac versus Whopper. Whopper, man, in a landslide.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, McDonald's fries are better.
Yeah. I was gonna say we had an incident. We had an incident once. My brother and I, we went to a local Burger King, and it was maybe like 11 o'clock at night. And when we got to the window, the girl told us that they were all out of Whoppers. And then she said, so then she said, but then she says to us, she goes, you know, as
saying we're all out of food.
no, but as a courtesy, she gives us a coupon book. And she says you can use this coupon for anything else on the menu. And we were just looking at each other like, well, what the hell else is there?
Yeah.
But had that happened at McDonald's, if you didn't have if you don't have a Big Mac, I'll take a quarter pounder. If you don't have this, I'd take like there's something else. But like with Burger King, if you don't have a Whopper, it's like I don't want your chicken sandwich. Like, you know, like I didn't come here for a chicken sandwich. So that's why.
Listen, when you're hungry, you're hungry. You gotta take whatever. But it's different with Burger King. Just like Mike mentioned about Nurse Ratched, man. When you're whatever you can get. At the time. Rap or rock?
Oh, see now you're getting difficult here. Rap.
Yeah.
Man, I'd have to say rock, barely, but
maybe a way of deciding that, because it's a hard question, is like you can like off the top of your head decide how many favorite bands would you have in rock as opposed to rap. And if one exceeds the other, maybe that would be like your...
Rock would exceed rap, but...
I would imagine with rap it's more like individual songs, whereas with rock it's more like the group and the album.
Yeah, especially the older rock, yeah.
Yeah.
Bobby Knight or Vince McMahon?
Wow. Vince McMahon, just because I worked for him, I guess.
Sure.
You know, yeah. I don't know.
Garfield or Heathcliff?
Oh, wow.
I love how this is a harder one than Bobby Knight or Vince McMahon.
Garfield, because he likes lasagna.
Right? Okay. I love lasagna. You're right. He's also the only cat that I can think of that used to kick the crap out of like a dog. He kicked Odie's ass all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Schwarzenegger or Stallone?
Schwarzenegger back in the day.
Yeah. Pens or pencils?
Pens? Yes.
Trying to make you think here. Krusty the Clown or It the Clown?
Or who else?
It the Clown.
Krusty?
Remember It the Clown? He was that psychotic...
Krusty the Clown.
Krusty. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Man, Star Trek. I grew up watching that, man, with Shatner and yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Every day or every week on TV.
Larry King or Barbara Walters?
Oh, come on. I guess Barbara Walters. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't like either one.
Wait! I got one for you. Speaking with both music and cartoon, do you remember the old '80s cartoon Silverhawks?
Vaguely.
Do you remember their theme songs?
No.
If you vaguely remembers the cartoon, you probably don't.
Yeah, because I always get into an argument with people where they try to tell me that Thundercats is the greatest theme song of the '80s, but I always counter with Silverhawks.
I gotta Google that. I'll check that out.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, Google Silverhawks intro theme and tell me that's not the greatest thing you've ever heard coming out of the 1980s.
Mike, either or, and if you had to choose one or the other, I guess maybe not today, but back in the day, tying someone's shoelaces together if they pissed you off, or giving them a wedgie.
Say that again.
Back in the day, tying somebody's shoelaces together if they pissed you off, or giving them a wedgie.
Probably tying the shoelaces together. I used to lock Henry Godwin's shoes when he was standing next to me in a bar.
Right.
I would put a lock on his shoes.
How do you put a lock on somebody's shoes in a bar?
Well, first of all, they have to be sort of inebriated, and second, you got to be real smooth.
Right,
real light-handed. Yes.
You know, I could see that.
And I did that on a few occasions to him.
But I could see you being the kind of guy that while you're doing that, as to not give it away, you have like the same facial expression. You're still smiling, like nodding your head. Yeah. Like,
I'm in mid-conversation with him while I'm doing it.
Genius. That's absolute genius. Roller coasters or Ferris wheels?
Roller coasters.
Leg day or bicep day?
Oh, leg or bicep?
Yeah.
Everybody hates leg day, bicep day.
First one to pick bicep day. I love it. Everyone picks leg day. So believe it or not, everyone's picked leg day that we've interviewed.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Wow.
But I'm with you, bicep day for sure. By the way, were you on a program back in the day that was, I mean, you obviously you can't plateau, you have to change different programs. Did you find yourself being more a fan of isolations or supersets?
Ooh. You say isolations.
Yeah, I mean, did you do isos more so, or like as far as just doing maybe 20 sets on one particular body muscle group, or did you just do body splits a lot?
There was a time when I was working out with Bob Holly, man, when we were training like 2.5 hours a day in the gym, and man, it was like we would do like 20 sets for each body part, you know, different, like 4 or 5 different exercises. And then we chest. Then we go to shoulders and do the same thing. And then we go to triceps and do the same thing. And then we'd go do abs. But
so you would do like you'd focus on all the push exercises in terms of range of motion first. Then
during that time,
you go over again with pull, which is bicep and back. That's crazy.
Another day, yeah. And it was high volume.
Did you find something as simple I did in terms of like when you plateau? A simple, just again, in terms of range of motion, I just brought that up. Just changing your range of motion a little bit can make all the difference. Like, for instance, if you're hitting your interior bicep, doing the reverse curl sometimes can make all the difference in the world, right?
Right, or what I would do is you make the change in weight and lower the reps and do, you know, more of a power routine for a while and then maybe drop back later and go lighter or whatever just to kind of re-stimulate the muscle. But yeah, and changing your hand placement on different exercises makes a lot of difference as well.
I found out that concentrated curls are the most devious in terms of people not always necessarily prioritizing them, but concentrated curls are really important. I mean, I don't know. Was that something that you included in your I mean, you probably did everything. You're working out with Bob Holly. I don't think he missed anything, right?
I think, yeah, we did stuff like straight bar 21s, we did preacher curls, we did dumbbell curls, we did dumbbell curls off the bench. We're on an incline bench, so it's all arms and there's no body in it at all. There's so many different things. He was brutal.
When you do the high rep, low weight exercises, a lot of times it supplements cardio because you're perspirating like crazy, especially if you only have like 30-second intervals between sets.
Yeah, I was too lazy to do that though. I'd take like 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But, I mean, and back then, God, I mean, everyone was probably just, and it was during the post-steroid era, so, you know, people really have to, the upkeep was probably really important at that time, too. And not to say people who don't know any knowledge about steroids, you still have to work out with a maniac, but the upkeep was probably, because it was like, okay, you still have to look really aesthetically good, but there's no performance-enhancing drugs that would help you at that time.
Yeah, there wasn't any shortcuts. You had to train hard and you had to eat right, which I didn't really understand back then. I was not eating enough. I could have got so much more out of what I was doing if I ate more. We were eating real clean, but just I didn't eat enough.
It's really hard though. I mean, like at 2 a.m., besides finding like a Denny's or like, you know what I mean? Like it's pretty hard probably just finding what you need anyway, like when you were on the road.
Yeah, we'd go to Denny's or Waffle House and just special order egg whites and pay all the extra money and chicken breasts and dry, you know, hash brown or something or dry toast.
But see, that's interesting because back then, you know, the health kick wasn't what it was back then that it is now. So were egg whites even a thing back then when you guys were?
No, when it comes to bodybuilding, egg whites have always been a thing.
It's always been a thing?
We special ordered them. Yeah, we would special order them at the restaurants.
It cost a bit more, but like, you know.
Did anybody ever look at you like when you ordered certain things? They were like, huh? Or they had to ask the boss, like, hey, do we make this? Like,
you mean in terms of
sometimes,
was there like ever like someone who ordered like a plate of like 20 eggs? I mean, I'm being serious here. Like, you know, guys back then.
Yeah, no, but I'm just talking about just like, you know, just like special requests for help. Like if you were to tell somebody in a Waffle House, like, hey, you know, I want like whole wheat toast and like, you know, and like, you know, like things like that. They're not used to, you know, they're not used to serving.
The separating of the eggs was sometimes you get funny looks because there wasn't like cartoned egg whites back then. It was they had to separate the yolks out of the eggs and they'd be like, why do you want just this? Egg whites.
I mean, since you're on the topic of like ordering food, were you one of those kinds of guys? Because like, here's the thing with me, and I always told Drelis, I think the same way. I don't care about. Even when I was a kid, I didn't care about getting autographs. I respected people. I was always raised with respect. I wasn't a smartass, but unless I was my friends. But like, I never cared about autographs, you know, seeking autographs. People are people to me. I've always seen it that way. People are just people. But were you one of those kinds of guys where like, if you were eating, is that like a cardinal no-no? If someone approached you and was like, hey.
No, I always signed, even if I was in the middle of eating. But I would ride with guys from time to time that would be kind of ugly, and I'm not going to say who, but they would be ugly to fans.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, they're eating their meal and stuff, but they ain't got to be ugly. But I would sign anytime.
You sometimes make a comment like, if you were close to guys, hey man, lighten up, or like shit like that, or it's just,
maybe, yeah, maybe sometimes, but otherwise I just let them do their thing, and I did it my way.
Yeah.
Well, is there a time what's the worst time a fan could approach you? In the gym?
I don't think in my mind, there was not a worse time because I always appreciated fans. I always wanted more fans,
Yeah.
So I was willing to sign or do anything, anytime. I guess maybe the gym would be, but I don't know. I never had that.
Definitely if you're
Bob
Molly,
I
would assume.
No, that's awesome to hear because a lot of people aren't like that. Like people usually just have like a time where it's like you can talk to me here, but don't talk to me there, and But
people wouldn't generally the way me and Holly were training for that period of time, man. People wouldn't approach us because they wanted to.
If you saw Nurse Ratched naked, would you ask her for an autograph?
Yeah,
sure.
I'd ask her for a number too.
Yeah. Right.
Last couple of questions and we're good. Horror or comedy?
Horror. No, comedy.
Oh.
Dang, that's a tough question. Comedy. Comedy.
Okay. Do you have a comedy that sticks out that was one of your favorites? Maybe there's too many to name, but something that pops off the top of your head, I guess.
Man. Wow, no. I'm drawing a blank. I'm thinking of my favorite movie right now, and it's not a comedy. Pulp Fiction is my favorite movie.
What's your favorite movie?
Pulp Fiction is probably one of my
favorites.
Pulp
Fiction, great movie. Pulp Fiction's great.
Yeah.
Changed the game, definitely.
Yeah.
Stephen King or Steven Spielberg?
Steven Spielberg.
Rocky or Raging Bull?
Oh. Rocky.
Yeah, it's not as easy as people think. There's two different, in my opinion, they're different movies. Boxing may be the backdrop, but it's two different movies. Chinese food or Mexican food?
Ooh, close. Chinese.
By a hair.
Yeah.
Frosted Flakes or Cheerios?
Frosted Flakes.
Never asked anybody the following, but I'm asking you this because it actually helped you in regards to getting the work with WF. VHS or DVDs?
Well, DVDs now, because they weren't around back when I made my promo pack.
Yeah, exactly. Where are the DVDs then? Swimming pools or beaches?
Swimming pools.
I don't like all that sand either. Chips Ahoy cookies or Oreo cookies?
Oreo, double stuff.
Double stuff is good. Orange juice or grape juice?
Ugh. Grape juice. Neither one of them, but grape juice, I guess.
Pepsi or cola? A lot of people
Pepsi.
do have oh wow, Pepsi.
Diet Pepsi though. But yeah, I like Diet Pepsi.
Our first Pepsi, that's awesome. We're taking tallies of this because it's groundbreaking stuff. Road trips or flying?
Man.
Maybe changed over the year. I don't know.
I'd say road trips because you can stop and get up and get out and stretch and look around. I guess I don't know, but then planes you get there quicker. But road trips probably.
Hey, plums or oranges?
Plums, I guess.
Wow, plums. Okay, why are plums so underrated? When's the last time you saw someone walking around eating a plum, other than yourself because you picked plums? But I've never seen in my life. I swear to you, Mike, and I'm not that, I'm not an old guy. I'm not a young guy either. I've never seen in my entire years walking in this entire life that I've led someone ever even chewing a plum, buying a plum, eating a plum, putting it inside a bag. I've never seen anyone in the shop. I mean, I can keep going. In supermarkets, I've never seen anybody purchase a plum. Plums are so underrated.
My mom used to buy them all the time.
I just picked on the side of easy because you have to peel an orange.
Yeah.
So, it's just a whole lot easier to eat a plum and,
And plus, you weren't high on orange when he said grape or orange. You weren't high on orange juice, so I figured you wouldn't pick orange.
Do me a favor, Mike. If you see somebody walking around eating a plum, take a picture of it if you can and text it to me.
It'll be like a Bigfoot sighting.
Yeah, right.
Like a Bigfoot sighting, exactly. Two more questions and we're out of here. What movies can you watch 1,000 times when you're bored and still enjoy it as if you were watching it the first time over and over again?
Pulp Fiction. The Deer Hunter,
Deer Hunter.
Apocalypse Now,
Yeah.
The Godfather, those kinds of movies.
Well, Apocalypse Now, people understand how realistic the movie was too, because a lot of it had to do with if you think about it, it started out with the pre-Ho Chi Minh days. It didn't even talked about the liberation of North and South Vietnam before they even became rivals. Before Ho Chi Minh actually decided to go down south, take over Vietnam, he was at a standstill with the U.S. because he didn't believe in violence. He was anti-violence. And a lot of times people don't understand that as the regime changed and Ho Chi Minh got older, and it got covered in Apocalypse Now, they spoke so detailed about some of the intricacies that happened in the Vietnam War that I was blown away. They talked about the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which never gets mentioned in any movie. And how when Lyndon B. Johnson decided to tear it up, thanks to McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, you don't see those subtle details. And I'm not saying that makes the movie great. I'm saying that when I'm watching a movie and I look up facts later on, it's kind of like a neat tidbit when you kind of match up some of the research people put into it. Like it kind of makes
it's kind of like you're a history teacher or something.
Yeah, what the hell? I should have taken that up for a living. Favorite animal, Mike? I think you mentioned that though, right? I don't know. Did you snakes or is it another animal?
It was snakes, but now I got a favorite dog. I got a wiener dog named TT, so I guess it's her. But
okay, that's great. Yeah. If you could be an animal, what animal would it be?
Oh, what animal would I be? I'd be a great white shark.
Nice.
At the top of the food chain.
Nice. Beavis and Butthead or Ren and Stimpy?
Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, thank you. Most likely, Mike, to say, it could be any of your colleagues or anyone that you know in any walk of life, most likely to say, stop, I'm hungry during a road trip.
Oh, gosh. Any of the guys, especially the ones that worked out. I heard Bundy had quite an appetite, but I never rode with Bundy.
Right.
Yeah, Bob Hollywood or Adam Bomb. I remember them many times. Man, we got to stop. We got to eat.
Most likely to say, hey, do my biceps look small today? Or
I never heard anybody say that. You talking about the egos in wrestling, man. Those guys, at least they put forth an ego, or they put forth an attitude that they're the biggest and the best. They would never show weakness.
Right. They'd probably be perceived as a weakness. Most likely to read a book quietly in the locker room.
Bob Backlund.
Most likely to run to catering and devour what's on the menu.
King Kong Bundy.
Wow.
Most likely to pretend to listen to you while checking a woman out.
Scott Hall.
Most likely to crack jokes in the middle of the ring during a match.
Savio Vega.
We heard about the Owen Hart thing. Was he like that legendary river? You know, people always.
Yes, he was.
He was, right? Okay.
There was one battle royal. I don't know if it was a Royal Rumble or one of the Raw Rumbles after a Royal Rumble or something, where he had pulled me into a corner. He was sitting up on the top turnbuckle and grabbed me from behind and pulled me in and took one of the top parts of his singlet and wrapped it around my face. And he had not washed his singlet in apparently a month or more because it stunk to high heavens. And he just giggled and laughed, and I called him a son of a bitch and shook him off and walked away.
Awesome. Most likely to be someone you call a friend in the industry?
Austin. Yeah, we still talk.
Oh, you guys still talk? That's great. Most likely to bitch about everything?
Adam Bomb.
Brian Clark. Honestly, we've covered so much ground. Jarrell, is there any closing comments, questions, or that you want to make?
I would. Well, one question. I would say, what is your most hated remake from something from your childhood?
Like a movie, you mean, right?
Yeah, like whether it was a cartoon or a TV show, and then they remade
a lot of stuff today.
Yeah, right. and they remade it today, and there are probably some where you're like, hey, that was actually pretty good, and there's one where you're like, that was the worst.
You know what? For me, actually, he mentioned it. For me, it's Godzilla. But I don't know. Do you have any? I hated the new Godzilla movie they made. It sucked.
Yeah, the new Godzilla sucked. I remember back when they were trying to make TV shows into movies, the Charlie's Angels thing.
Oh, right.
I thought that was lame.
Sure.
Lame.
Sure.
All right. And is there a particular like wrestler, male or female, today, even if you don't watch the current product on a consistent basis, just one person where you're like, you know, that person is actually cool. Like you're a fan of like one particular person, male or female?
Good question. Dolph Ziggler?
Oh, cool.
Do you
Kurt
watch
Hennig looking.
Mike?
I really don't watch, but I've seen him from time to time, and he moves just like Hennig used to move. You know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. I feel like I told you, Ellis. I feel like the business today, it's almost like a high-priced call girl. When she shows up, she looks like a 10. Head to toe. Great body, great face, great clothing, great makeup. She looks amazing. And, you know, she's knocking on your door. You open the door. She shows up. And then almost like a robot that just stands still or freezes, like a glitch. She doesn't know what to do. And you're looking at her and you're like, well, come on. Like, you're dressed the role. You look the role. Entertain me.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't know what to do. That's, in my opinion, that's the business today. They're all dressed up. They're polished. They're fancy. But
yeah, they take them from the very beginning, like before. A lot of them are even trained, and they train them their way, and that's just kind of the way it is. It becomes a product where there's a lot of the same thing over and over again because that's what they're creating.
Yeah. Right. I would tell people, like, regardless of the great trainers they have there, there's an overall vision because they're one entity. And when they're one entity, the factory is going to co-produce or mass-produce some of the same types of talent that learned the system the same way. Therefore, individuality is almost like a rare form of art in pro wrestling today, right?
If they wanted to change that, the WWE would have training facilities all over the world. They would have dojos in Japan, and they would send their guys to all these different places and get them very well rounded, and then bring them back.
So true, man. Like, they could actually experience what working in front of a TV is in an entity that's not even their own, or in an atmosphere, or just, you know, in a surrounding. If you're going to your surrounding states, there's not much of a difference. But you're right, man. Internationally, at least. What a culture. I mean, pro wrestling has always been hot. Japan, old Japan and new Japan, they're probably hotter. I was having a conversation with somebody. There's this guy named Nakamura, and he wrestles for the WWE. I don't know if you've seen him. He's a great entertainer. He's got this great ring entrance and stuff going on, but people seem to think that just because he came from Japan, he's automatically a great talent. New Japan has so much money that they wouldn't get rid of their top 5-6 talents that they have because they've been around since '72. And they treat, as you know, you've probably been there, like they actually treat pro wrestling as a sport. They used to make, like I think it still does, it makes the front page, like the results and everything. Like they respect pro wrestling so much over there. So,
agreed.
My closing statements are this. In my opinion, this may sound corny, but as the seconds of a minute begin to morph into hours, cherish what time you have represented. For me and our listeners, this last hour or so has been great. It's been a treat. Thank you, Mike. I cherish it.
Greatest intro I've ever heard on a podcast introducing a guest ever. Number one, hands down.
I really appreciate that.
He's great. He's great at that.
Mike, please tell us about what you have to talk about regarding some of the stuff you and I spoke about that you want to plug.
I've got a podcast that's just kind of starting out. We've only put up 2 of the episodes so far on YouTube. It's called Talking Trash with Duke the Dumpster Drosy, and it is on the 60-Minute Broadway YouTube channel. I work with these guys from the 60-Minute Broadway, and again, it's called Talking Trash with Duke the Dumpster Drosy, and that is my video podcast.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for your time, Mike. We'll definitely have you around again.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care, Ben.